All right, let's talk about something really big that's happening behind the scenes in tech right now. This is one of those quiet power shifts that most people don't notice, but it can change everything for Apple, Nvidia, and honestly, the future of our devices. For years, Apple had a huge advantage, a scary advantage. They could walk into TSMC, which is the world's most important chip factory, and basically say, "We want everything." And TSMC said yes. Back in 2020, Apple bought all of TSMC's 3 nanometer chip production, all of it, no leftovers. That meant Apple got the fastest chips in the world, and nobody else could even touch them. iPhones, iPads, Macs, all powered by chips no competitor could buy. That was peak Apple power. But now, that era might be over, at least for now. Here's the big shift. Nvidia is rising fast, like really fast, and it's starting to squeeze Apple out. Why? AI. Nvidia is the king of AI chips. Every company training AI models, every data center, every big AI project, they all want Nvidia chips. And Nvidia doesn't make those chips themselves. They go to TSMC, same place Apple goes. So now, Apple isn't alone anymore. According to supply chain sources, Nvidia may have already become TSMC's biggest customer in 1 or 2 quarters of 2025. And those same sources say Nvidia will probably stay ahead of Apple through all of 2026. That's wild. Let's talk money for a second, but keep it simple. TSMC said their 2025 revenue jumped 36% to $122 billion. That's massive growth. Nvidia is expected to grow sales by about 62%. Apple, not counting services like Apple Music and iCloud, is growing around 3.6%. You don't need to be a math expert to see what's happening here. Nvidia is exploding. Apple is steady but slow. And when TSMC looks at who's buying the most chips, who's paying the most, who needs the most advanced tech, Nvidia suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Now, this doesn't mean Apple is doomed, not even close, but it does mean Apple can't just take over an entire new chip generation like before. Apple really wants that power back, though. In 2024, Apple's COO Jeff Williams reportedly made a very quiet trip to Taiwan. No big press, no announcements, just a private visit to TSMC. The goal? Try to lock down a huge deal for the new 2 nanometer chips. Basically, Apple was trying to say, hey, remember when we bought everything last time? Let's do that again. We don't know how that meeting ended. No one outside those rooms knows. But what we do know is that Nvidia is now a serious problem for Apple's plans. And here's where things get interesting. Apple and Nvidia need TSMC for very different reasons. Apple uses TSMC chips for iPhones, iPads, Macs, watches, and more. iPhone sales aren't growing much anymore, but they are stable. Apple sells hundreds of millions of devices every year, like clockwork. Nvidia, on the other hand, is almost fully tied to AI. Their demand is insane right now, but it's also risky. If the AI boom slows down, cools off, or changes direction, Nvidia's demand could drop fast. Apple doesn't have that problem. Even if AI hype fades, people will still buy iPhones, still buy Macs, still upgrade every few years. So Apple is the safe customer, Nvidia is the high-growth customer. And TSMC has to balance both. Now let's talk about the tech itself, because this part is actually super exciting. TSMC has officially confirmed that 2 nanometer chips are now in mass production. Not testing, not planning, actual production. They didn't even make a big announcement. It was just quietly added to their website. That's how TSMC rolls. These new 2 nanometer chips use something called the N2 process. You don't need to remember that name, just know this. These chips are a big deal. TSMC says they can give about 15 to 20% more performance at the same power, or they can give the same performance while using 25 to 30% less power. That's huge. That means faster phones or much better battery life, sometimes both. And yes, Apple is expected to use these chips first in the A20 processor, which should power the iPhone 18 lineup. That's where Apple still keeps an edge. They are usually first in line for the newest tech. TSMC's CEO, C.C. Wei, also said something really important. He said production will ramp up faster in 2026, driven by smartphones and AI chips. That tells us everything. Smartphones means Apple, AI chips means Nvidia. They are now sharing the future. And it doesn't stop at 2-nanometer chips. Apple is already expected to be first again for the next step after that, a 1.4-nanometer chip, likely for the iPhone 19. That's crazy small. We're talking about tech that sounds fake, but it's real. So what's the big picture here? Apple is still extremely powerful. They still get early access, they still have massive scale, but they no longer control the entire game. Nvidia has entered Apple's territory, and Nvidia is throwing insane money and demand at TSMC because AI is the hottest thing in tech right now. This is not Apple versus Nvidia in a fight. This is Apple versus Nvidia in a quiet tug of war over factory time, machines, and silicone. And the craziest part? Most people will never hear about this, but it decides who gets the fastest chips, who gets better performance, who gets ahead. For the first time in years, Apple is not alone at the top of TSMC's priority list. And that alone tells you how much the tech world is changing right now. This next few years, they're going to be very interesting.